Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining in again today for the 22 at noon live session. And when I was doing I was kind of doing the intro a couple days ago to remind everybody of this. I was stating that if the weather cooperated, we were going to be broadcasting live from the mall in about today when we had the broadcast. Unfortunately, the weather didn't cooperate, so what we have here in Washington is a whole bunch of sleet today, which means that I'm broadcasting from indoors today because sleet's not my friend. So anyway, with that said, to start off with, just wanted to say I'm Rich Lyles with the Wyoming PTAC, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and basically just welcome and thank you for joining me today for another 22 at noon session, which is presented by the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce and the Wyoming PTAC. Today's topic is going to be HUBZone and 8A certifications, and this will be a 22-minute live broadcast. So, let's see. So, and some of my technology is not working really well this morning either, in addition to the wonderful weather that we're having here on the East Coast. So, okay. So basically, what I'm going to talk about today are those two socioeconomic programs. I'm going to just briefly touch on what socioeconomic programs are. Then I'm going to talk about the HUBZone and the benefits of being HUBZone certified. Then I'm going to talk about the qualifications for HUBZone certification. And then I'm going to talk about the 8A program, and that would be the number 8 and the small letter A, so 8A. And I'll talk about the benefits of that, and then the qualifications for applying for that certification. And if we have enough time, I'll talk a little bit about the MentorProtege program, because it's something that does that is particularly relevant to the 8A program, but also some of the other something that is also on the for all small mentor protege. So, with that said, let's talk about just briefly the socioeconomic programs. And number one is we have basically 7 socioeconomic programs. We have small business, we have woman-owned small business, we have economically disadvantaged woman-owned small, we have veteran-owned small business, service-disabled veteran-owned small business, HUBZone, and 8A. And today we're going to talk about HUBZone and 8A. So the first thing is with these socioeconomic programs, they basically exist to create a level playing field, or help try to level the playing field, because it's really difficult for a small business that maybe has $300,000 or $400,000 a year in annual sales, or even one that has $3 or $4 million in annual sales, to adequately compete with a large business that maybe has $500 million in sales in a year. So these exist to basically try to level that playing field, make it easier for small businesses to compete successfully and win contracts and do business in the federal arena. So to that end, we have the socioeconomic programs, and those socioeconomic programs have certain targets or goals for the federal government. Specifically for the HUBZone, each year the federal government has a 3% goal of awarding contracts to HUBZone businesses. So 3% of the total federal spend on goods and services is goal to go towards certified HUBZone firms. The second category, the 8A, the federal government has a 5% goal per year for firms that are 8A certified, and you know, it doesn't sound like an awful lot, but a 3% goal or 5% goal, when you consider the federal government last year purchased just slightly over $500 billion in goods and services, assuming it was $500 billion, because that makes the math a little bit easier for me. The 3% set aside would be $15 billion, as B as in billion, and 8A, the 5% set aside for them would come up to $25 billion. So between the two of these programs, there's a goal of $40 billion to be spent in these areas for firms that are certified as such. So let's start off by talking about some of the benefits of the HUBZone. Basically, if you're certified HUBZone, you're eligible for set-asides. And what a set-aside is if I'm a contracting official, contracting officer, I can say, okay, I want to set this particular procurement aside so that only HUBZone certified businesses can bid on it, or only woman-owned firms can bid on it, or only veteran firms, etc. So if you're HUBZone certified, you're eligible for set-asides that are 100% set-asides, so you're only competing against other HUBZone certified firms, which can make it a lot easier for those small businesses to win the contract. So you're not competing against a Boeing or a Northrop Grumman or a Lockheed Martin. I always want to say Martin Marietta, but I know that's long gone, but Lockheed Martin, etc. Doesn't mean that you can't team up and partner with those companies and have subcontracting opportunities. That's always a great option for small businesses. But if you're competing for a prime contract, you're not competing directly head-to-head with those companies. Another benefit is that you have sole-sourced opportunities. Now, sole-sourced opportunities aren't necessarily, they're certainly not exclusive to HUBZone. In fact, the sole-source contracting opportunities for HUBZones is still relatively new. It's been around a long time in the 8A program, but and it acts a little differently than the sole source does in 8A. And of course, what a sole source is that instead of having an item competed out, if it meets the criteria for it, a contracting personnel, a contracting officer can say, okay, I'm going to enter into price negotiations with your company, and we intend to do a sole source award to whoever it is. There's a lot of parameters for that, and this particular talk is it's way outside the parameters of what we get into here. I could do 2 or 3 hours on it easily and still have more to cover, but it is an option out there. If you're HUBZone certified, you could potentially have a sole source opportunity. Another benefit is with dealing with large primes, any large prime contractor who is classified as quote-unquote other than small, because the federal government doesn't really classify business as large, it's either small or you're other than small. If you're if you're other than small and you have a federal contract that's greater than $700,000 per year, then that large contractor has to have socioeconomic goals, set-asides that are equal to or greater than whatever the federal government has. So for HUBZone and 8A respectively, they have to have a 3% set-aside goal and a 5% set-aside goal. The other benefit of being HUBZone certified is that there's a 10% bidding preference. If you do bid on something that's full and open competition, meaning it's not set aside, it's not specifically part of the small business realm, if it's full and open competition, everybody from a firm the size of 1 employee to a firm the size of Abbott Labs at 50,000 or however many employees they have or more, 200,000, I'm not sure, means anybody can bid on it. It's full and open competition. If you're HUBZone certified and you bid on something like that, you get a 10% price preference. So a large business could bid $1 million, for example, and you could bid $1,096,000. The way it works is they would add 10% to that large business's bid, and then evaluate it from there. So they would evaluate theirs. If they bid at 1.1 million, you bid 4,000 less, you would actually that certified firm would actually win the contract. So that's the major benefits of HUBZone. Now, to qualify is basically just 4 qualifications for HUBZone. Number 1, you have to be a small business in order to qualify. The business has to be at least 51% or more owned by U.S. citizens, or by other companies that are 51% or more owned by U.S. citizens. The primary office has to be in a HUBZone, and at least 35% of the employees must reside in a HUBZone. Now, they don't have to reside in that same HUBZone as the primary office, but they do have to live in a HUBZone somewhere. And in urban areas, that's kind of the kicker, because generally speaking, urban areas aren't county-wide HUBZone. They're usually broken down by census tract. So one census tract is a HUBZone, then one right next to it might not be. In Wyoming, we're kind of lucky in a way, because there are 8 counties that are designated as HUBZone counties county-wide, and they're Albany. The counties are Albany, Platte, Goshen, Niobrara, Campbell, Hot Springs, Fremont, and the one that's just north of Hot Springs, which is Washington. I've only been in Wyoming a year. I'm still learning all my counties, but those are the 8. And now Cheyenne and Casper, so Laramie County and Natrona County, respectively, are not county-wide hub zones, although each one of them does have 3 census tracts that are hub zone census tracts. If you're county-wide, it's real easy to make that 35% or more requirement, because pretty much everybody who works for you winds up living in that same county as well. A little trickier in places where it's not county-wide. Certainly not impossible, but it's a little bit more challenging. So, but anyway, those are the 4 basic qualifications to be HUBZone certified. Let's take a look at 8A. Now, some of the benefits of being 8A certified is and actually let me back up one step. The 8A program is basically the social and economic disadvantaged business program for the federal government, essentially, in a nutshell. Some of the benefits for 8A is just like the HUBZone, they're eligible for set-asides. Contracting official can set aside, so only HUBZone certified firms can bid on it. Sole source awards, that's another benefit. The sole source for HUBZone, for 8A, has been around for many, many years, and contracting officials are quite used to using it, and they're quite comfortable with it. So it's a lot more common to see sole source awards for certified HUBZone firms. I could once again spend an hour or two going into the particulars as to why that's so, but the bottom line is that it's been around for a while. Contracting officials are used to using it, so they, as far as all sole source contracts are concerned, it's most likely you're going to see a sole source award within the realm of the 8A program. So the other thing is you're eligible to participate in the MentorProtege program. This used to be really significant because the 8A program was the only program that had a MentorProtege option in it. With the law change a couple of years ago, now there's a program called the All Small MentorProtege program, so all small businesses are potentially eligible to participate, and basically the MentorProtege program is basically small business can team up, form joint ventures with a large business and not be considered affiliated with that large business. And affiliation is a terrible thing. If you're a small business, you don't want to be considered affiliated, because all that large business's revenue or number of employees, depending on whether your size standard is based on revenue or number of employees, would be added together. If you're affiliated with it, you could lose your small business status. But if you're in the MentorProtege agreement, it kind of exempts you from having to worry about the affiliation, being affiliated. So that's a really, really great thing, because you won't be considered affiliated. You still be considered a small business, but yet you can be able to use some of that experience, expertise, maybe potential access to additional capital that teaming up and forming a joint venture with that large business would afford you, without having to worry about with some of the risks that go along with it. Now, real quickly, the qualifications to become an 8A firm. Number 1, just like HUBZone, you have to be a small business. Number 2, you have to have not been in the 8A program before. Being in the 8A program is a one-time thing, whether for a business or for an individual. 8A program lasts for 9 years, 2 phases. You have the first 4 years and the last 5 years, kind of in 2 separate phases of the program. But you can only be in the program for one time, so it's one lifetime thing. So anyway, so you can't have been in the program before. At least 51% or more of the business must be owned by U.S. citizens. 51% of the business must be owned by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. So let me take a quick second and talk about the definition for the 8A program of economic disadvantage, because there is another set-aside program called the Economically Disadvantaged Woman-Owned Small Business certification. These 2 programs were passed at different times by Congress, so they have 2 different sets of criteria for the definition of economic disadvantage. But for the 8A program, your net worth at time of application has to be $250,000 or more once you're accepted. I'm sorry, 250,000 or less. Once you're accepted into the 8A program, instantaneously that jumps up to 750,000. But for purposes of applying, net worth has to be $200,000 or less. Adjusted gross income (AGI) also has to be, second criteria for economic disadvantage is your adjusted gross income has to be less than or equal to $250,000 averaged over the last 3 years for the individual owner of the company. And the third thing is for each individual, their total assets, regardless of encumbrances, but the total value of their assets, not net value, but total value of their assets has to be $4 million less. You meet those three criteria for this particular program, the federal government will consider you to be economically disadvantaged. Now, social disadvantage is a little bit different. The way the law is written in the FAR regulations, it doesn't say they have to be an ethnic minority. However, if you are a member of certain ethnic minorities, then you are automatically considered to be socially disadvantaged in the United States. For example, if you're African American, if you're Hispanic American, if you're Native American, etc. And in the FAR, and I don't know all of them off the top of my head, there's a very detailed listing of exactly which ethnic groups will qualify for social disadvantage in the United States. Now, you don't necessarily have to be socially disadvantaged, and I want to use one quick example of this. It's possible, for example, anybody to be socially disadvantaged, quite frankly, but it's a much higher level burden proof. Let me give you one example. If I were to use my mom as an example, when she was in high school, she took an aptitude test, and she and another gentleman scored the highest on this test, really in the high school at that time for that class in that year. And their analytical ability was really high, and their cognitive ability and their quantitative abilities were really high, and their reasoning was extremely high. The guidance counselor told the other young man that he'd make a really great law student, and my mom in 1967 was told that she would make a really great hairdresser. That gentleman went on to a fairly high political office in the state of Maine. My mom eventually worked her way up and got a bachelor's degree and got a professional position, but I think that in a situation like that, you could make a very compelling argument that that's a pretty good case of social disadvantage. So, and that's not the only one. There's tons of them out there, but anyway, just make sure there's a misconception that with the 8A program they have to be an ethnic minority in order to qualify. Qualifications is a little bit easier, but no, you absolutely do not. The law is not written that way. So that's social and economic disadvantage. The next thing is that the owners, of 51% owners who are socially and economically disadvantaged, must not only own the company, in fact, they must also have control over the company as well. So they can't just be straw owners; they really have to own and control. Last couple of qualifications is that this is fairly ambiguous, but the way it's written is you have to display good character, or demonstrate good character, I think is the actual words used. Demonstrate good character. That can mean a number of things. Basically, it means, if you're currently under indictment for something, you're probably not going to pass muster and qualify in the 8A program. But anyway, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. You're going to fill out a lot of information. Some of it's going to be somewhat personal. What I've always told people is that just disclose if you have something in your past that maybe didn't work out real well for you, quite a few years back. Disclose, and then because if you don't disclose, that's going to pretty much be grounds for denial right out of the gate. So. Then last but not least, the company must show what's called potential for success. And to that end, there's something that's commonly referred to and talked about in here. It's called the 2-year rule. And essentially, a business needs to be in business. Essentially, you need to be in business for at least 2 years in order to qualify for the 8A program. I have people ask me, is there an exception to this as a waiver? And yes, there is. You can actually apply and ask for a waiver. But but basically, if you just started out and you don't have experience in the industry, that's not a really great indicator of success necessarily. And what the SBA really wants to see is that you know the industry well, you know the business environment well, and you're going to succeed. So, for example, if you're starting up a company and you already have 20 years experience in the industry, you might be a candidate for that waiver. You wouldn't necessarily have to have 20 years. It could be a lower amount, but generally speaking, you're going to have to be in business for 2 years. But it is possible to have a waiver. That's kind of why I bring it up. So anyway, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I spoke a little bit about the MentorProtege program. Looks like I'm right at about the 21-minute mark here, so I'm going to hold that for another time. Just bear in mind that we will have a full-length webinar that's going to be 60 to 90 minutes on this coming up in the spring, spring, and I don't have that scheduled directly in front of me right now, but we will be covering this topic in much greater detail as far as qualifications, as far as a number of things, benefits, etc., mechanics of how to go through and actually apply. And we will be covering that later on in the year, and we'll be doing it in conjunction also with the Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce. So anyway, like I said, in a nutshell, just about covers it. And thanks for joining me today for this 22 at noon session on these two socioeconomic programs, 8A and HUBZone. And this presentation today was sponsored by the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce and the Wyoming PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Center. And be sure to stay connected with the Chamber, the Cheyenne Chamber, to know when additional 22 at noon will be coming up. The next one won't be this coming week. It will be the following week after Thanksgiving. It will be presented by Andy Lewis. She'll be covering two of the other socioeconomic programs, specifically the veteran-owned programs and the woman-owned small business programs. And that will be Tuesday, 12 days from now, if my math is correct. And but you can get that information, and you can access this video later online at just going to www.CheyenneChamber, CheyenneChamber, all one word, .org, and you can look at that and get information on future and upcoming events. So thanks for joining me, and I won't see you next time, but Andy will see you next time, and I'll see you the time after that. So have a great day, enjoy the rest of your lunch, and I hope there's no sleet in Cheyenne this morning or any snow. So take care, and we'll see you after the holidays. Have a great holiday. Thanks.